There are two people standing in line at a coffee shop. One is wearing worn sneakers, a faded jacket, carrying a battered phone. The other is dressed almost identically. Same sneakers, same kind of jacket, same unremarkable phone. But one of them owns the building they're standing in. You'd never know which one. And that's exactly the point. We've been taught to read wealth wrong. We look for the signals, the watch, the car, the logo on the bag. But the people who have quietly built serious, lasting financial security, they often look like everyone else because they stopped performing wealth a long time ago and started building it. This video is about the signals you've been missing, not the flashy ones, the subtle ones, the quiet habits, the invisible choices, the patterns that don't photograph well but compound over decades. Let's start with something that doesn't show up on any bank statement: time. If you ask most people what they do with more money, they'll describe a lifestyle, a house, a trip, a thing. But if you ask the quietly wealthy, the answer is almost always the same. They'd buy more time, not time off necessarily, time that belongs to them, time they control. There's a technical term for this: schedule autonomy. It means the ability to decide when you work, when you rest, when you show up. And research from the American Time Use Survey shows that self-employed high earners report dramatically more of it than hourly workers in low-wage jobs. The gap isn't just in income, it's in sovereignty over the hours of your own life. Think about what it means to not own your time, to have to ask permission to attend your child's school play, to rearrange your entire week because a manager changed a shift, to eat lunch when a schedule says you can, not when you're hungry. This is the invisible tax paid by people who haven't yet built financial security, a tax not on money, but on agency. Now, compare that to someone who has spent 20 years making small, boring, unglamorous decisions and has quietly built enough that they can choose when they take a meeting. That freedom isn't visible in what they wear, but it reshapes their entire experience of being alive. Here's the second signal, and this one surprises people: debt. Or rather, the absence of it. We live in a culture that normalizes debt. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards, buy now, pay later apps. Debt has been packaged and sold to us as participation in modern life. But look carefully at who holds the most of it, and a pattern emerges. Highly wealthy households carry a debt-to-asset ratio, that's the proportion of what you owe compared to what you own, of under 5%. Households near the bottom of the wealth ladder carry ratios above 60%. Federal Reserve research found that households with ratios above 75% had a near zero probability of ever moving into the top wealth tier. The math of debt doesn't just slow you down, it locks the door. And yet, most people who struggle financially don't feel like they chose debt. They feel like it chose them: an emergency, a gap in income, a medical bill, a moment when there was no cushion. This is why the absence of debt isn't just a financial fact. It's often evidence of something deeper: stability, patience, and the quiet accumulation of small buffers over time. Only 37% of American families carry zero credit card debt, and wealthier families account for a disproportionate share of that number. Not because they were never tempted, but because at some point, sometimes generations back, sometimes just a few years ago, someone in that line decided the cost of borrowing wasn't worth it. Now let's talk about something that sounds abstract but matters more than almost anything else in this conversation: the way you think about time, not how you manage your calendar, how far into the future you're willing to imagine your own life. Economists call this your time preference. A high time preference means you want the reward now. A low time preference means you're willing to wait, because you believe the future version of you is worth investing in. It's the marshmallow test, but for your whole life. NBER research found that people with lower time discount rates, the patient ones, the ones willing to defer gratification, accumulate between 50 and 100% more wealth over a lifetime than their impatient counterparts. That's not a small edge, that's a completely different financial destination. People with high time preference aren't stupid or careless. Often they grew up in environments where the future felt uncertain or even unsafe. So, of course, you take what you can now. Long term thinking is, in part, a luxury of stability, but it's also a skill, and skills can be built. The practical sign of low time preference isn't always visible. It shows up as a retirement account opened early, a debt paid down instead of a vacation taken, a business investment made for a return that won't arrive for 3 years. These choices don't look like anything from the outside, but inside the spreadsheet of someone's life, they compound enormously. One study of older Americans found that the patient ones, measured not by personality tests, but by actual financial behavior, had retirement wealth between 35 and 60% higher than those who tended to prioritize the present. The gap had nothing to do with income. It had everything to do with orientation to the future. Now consider where people choose to live and why. This one is more complicated than it looks. Location is often treated as a lifestyle choice, where you want to be, what feels right, what you can afford. But for the quietly wealthy, location is frequently a strategic decision, one made with a calculator in the back of the mind even when it doesn't look like it. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The neighborhood you grow up in shapes your financial trajectory in measurable ways. Research found that each additional year a child spends in a wealthier neighborhood adds roughly 4% to their adult earnings. That compounds. A childhood spent in a stable, connected community doesn't just feel better, it builds human capital in ways that last for decades. Wealthy people who move don't always move to the most expensive city or the most glamorous address. Often they move toward lower cost of living, reduced tax burden, and proximity to professional networks. The choice maximizes optionality, keeping future choices open rather than closing them off. They move toward financial breathing room, not toward status. Now let's go somewhere most financial documentaries skip: relationships. Marriage, as an institution, is statistically one of the most powerful wealth-building structures in existence. Not because love is a financial instrument, but because stable, long-term partnership creates conditions in which wealth can accumulate: shared costs, aligned goals, reduced risk, and a second income that doesn't require hiring anyone. Panel data from one of the longest-running economic surveys in the world found that continuously married couples accumulate nearly twice the wealth of those who never married by the time they reach retirement age. That's not a slight advantage. That's doubling the outcome on the same income. And the reverse is just as stark. Divorce, independent of everything else, reduces median net worth by approximately 77%. Not because people are reckless, because separation is expensive, disruptive, legally complex, and economically brutal in ways that take years to recover from. This isn't an argument for staying in a bad relationship. It's an observation about what stability does over time. The quietly wealthy aren't just financially stable. They tend to have found ways to build relational stability too. And the two reinforce each other in ways that are hard to untangle. Each year of a stable marriage, research shows, adds measurably to household net worth. Not dramatically year to year, but steadily, like compound interest, where your returns generate their own returns applied to a life. And now, for perhaps the most counterintuitive signal of all. The truly wealthy don't spend money to look wealthy. This cuts against everything advertising has ever told you. But research consistently shows that high-income households spend a smaller share of their money on visible luxury goods than lower-income households do. Visible consumption, cars, clothing, jewelry, the things people see, represents roughly 12% of spending for low-income households. For wealthy ones, closer to 5%. The people with the least are spending the most, proportionally, to look like they have more. NBER researchers found that lower income households spend a higher share of their income on visible luxury goods than wealthier ones. Why? Because visible spending is social. It communicates status in environments where other signals of security aren't available. When you can't show your portfolio, you show your watch. A Spectrum Group survey found that 86% of millionaires describe themselves as frugal or value-conscious spenders. Only 6% said luxury goods were a high priority. This isn't about being cheap. It's about having internalized that the goal of money is freedom, and freedom doesn't require an audience. Stanley and Fallow found the same thing in their research on wealthy Americans. The psychological traits most associated with wealth accumulation weren't ambition or intelligence. They were frugality and a sense of personal responsibility, the ability to delay, the refusal to perform. And this brings us to savings, not as a financial behavior, but as a psychological posture. Millionaires studied in depth allocated nearly 20% of their income to savings and investments. The average American puts away around 5%. That gap isn't explained by income alone. Some of the highest savers weren't the highest earners. They were the most intentional. The presence of liquid savings, money you can access quickly without penalties, is one of the clearest dividing lines in financial resilience. Over 93% of people in the top income tier had liquid emergency savings. Among those at the bottom, the number dropped to 54%. That gap isn't just about money. It's about what happens when life surprises you. Financial flexibility, the ability to absorb a shock, seize an opportunity, or simply wait, is a form of power that never photographs. You can't see it at a dinner party, but it shapes every decision a person makes, every risk they're willing to take, every opportunity they're able to hold on to long enough to see it pay off. Capgemini research found that even high net worth individuals, people with millions in assets, keep roughly 25% of their wealth in cash or cash equivalents. That's not laziness. That's optionality. The ability to move, to say yes when everyone else has to say no. Here's the thing about all of these signals: time ownership, low debt, long-term thinking, stable relationships, strategic location, spending restraint, financial flexibility. None of them are loud. None of them trend. None of them make a good photo. They are, almost by definition, the opposite of what gets attention. They're the choices made in private, in the unglamorous parts of a week, when no one is watching and nothing feels urgent. They're the slow work. And slow work done consistently is the thing that actually changes where you end up. 80% of US millionaires surveyed in the Millionaire Next Door research were first-generation wealthy. They didn't inherit it. They built it, often while living in houses that didn't impress anyone, driving cars that didn't turn heads, and spending money on things that never made it to anyone's feed. The quietly wealthy have figured out something that consumer culture works very hard to prevent you from discovering: that the performance of wealth and the building of wealth are not just different, they are often opposites. Every dollar spent to look rich is a dollar not working toward being free. So let's go back to that coffee shop. Two people in line, identical in every visible way. But one of them, the one who owns the building, isn't thinking about the building right now. They're thinking about their afternoon, about the fact that when they leave here, the rest of the day is theirs, not owed to anyone, not borrowed against, not performing for anyone in the room. The single insight at the heart of everything we've just explored is this: wealth, real wealth, is the accumulation of options. Not things, not status, options. The option to wait, the option to move, the option to say no, the option to be still. You now see what most people walk past every day without noticing: Not the watch, not the car. The quiet, unhurried person who doesn't need to show you anything because they already know exactly what they have.